Hi, you're watching West Bloomfield 911. I'm your host, Tim Shepard, and on behalf of Chief Michael Patton and my Deputy Chief Kurt Lawson, as well as my brothers and sisters in blue, I'd like to welcome you all to the show. Joining me today, State Senator Jim Runestad of Michigan's 15th District. So, Senator, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day. I know your schedules are very busy, and we appreciate you coming here to talk to me today about what you do and who you are as a person.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Excellent. So let's start with what is the 15th District? Can you give me an idea of what that incorporates and the communities you represent?
Yes, it basically incorporates southwest Oakland County, which is West Bloomfield, Novi, Milford, White Lake, Commerce, Orchard Lake, part of Northville, Walled Lake, Wixom, and I think that's it.
And I mean, that's a lot.
Area.
Yeah, that's a lot of people and a lot of geographical area to cover. I would imagine that with such a diverse population, you have a lot of things being pulled at you in a lot of different directions, and being able to represent everybody is a difficult chore. So as far as representing people, what made you decide to get into politics? Why is this important to you, and what has driven you to the position you're in now?
I always had an interest in politics. When I was young, I started reading newspapers when I was around 15 and read newspapers every day, multiple newspapers. And then when I went to college, I was going to be a teacher. My father was a principal. My mother was a teacher. My sister was a teacher. So I went to Central Michigan University, got a teaching degree. And again, I was interested in politics. I had a political science minor, a history major. I was going to be a government economics teacher. And there was no jobs in teaching at that time, so I ended up going into insurance. Okay. And then I was talking to my dad when I was in my early 30s. I remember sitting on the porch with him, and I was talking about things I thought were wrong with politics and things that could be improved to help families. And he said, you keep talking about these things, but you got to implement them. You got to turn them into action. Sure. I said I'd never had any inkling as to what he was even talking about. No one in my circle had ever been in politics. Okay. So I drove home that night and I was pondering on what he said, and I said, he's right. So I started looking around, found a Republican club, joined that, eventually became the president of that, and then it just kind of started me on that whole road to eventually public service.
Well, it's amazing. In civil service, I think it takes a special type of person that is drawn to that to make a difference for others. I think what it boils down to, and this is just my perspective, but being able to serve others is so satisfying. Do you feel like this was something that you're drawn to? I mean, you obviously went to college for something different. Are you married? Do you have a family?
Yes.
Okay.
I have my wife Kathy. We've been married for 23 years.
Okay.
5 kids, 12 grandkids. So we've
so you have a huge family and
huge family.
And how does your family feel in terms of the direction that you've gone with? Do you have any perspective from them or what they think of Dad and Grandpa has done so far?
It's interesting how the public perceives how these things happen and how they really happen. I remember when I first told my wife that I was thinking about running for office, and I remember the look on her face of just complete shock, and she said, "You didn't tell me about this. You never told me about this."
Okay.
We'd been married for, at that time, 12 years or something. Sure. And I said, I didn't know myself. I never had any thought I would ever go into politics. And she said, well, I'll support you. I believe you would do an excellent job. You'd be an excellent public servant, but I'm not giving any speeches, and I'm not going and doing anything like that.
Right. She gave you the preface is, I'm not doing that stuff, right?
She said, I'm not doing
right.
any of those things. She
Okay.
said, I'll keep everything going as far as the home and the kids to permit you to do this, and you couldn't ask for more. I have the best wife in the whole world, and she did. She's kept everything going, been one of my strongest supporters. The kids saw what the toll it takes. Okay. I've asked them, would any of them be interested in ever going to politics, and they said no. Okay. Because you pay such a price. There's a huge burden. You're in a fishbowl all the time, everywhere you go, and you miss every kind of a function function, because at every Memorial Day and 4th of July and every single function, you are out there in the public, and it takes away a tremendous amount of time from the family. And that sacrifice, they said that they've seen what I went through, and they wouldn't want to do it.
Yep, I can relate. You know, as being a police officer, we have similar sacrifices where in terms of missing functions and holidays and things like that. So I do understand and can relate to what that drain is. I haven't been on that side with the kids, like my father wasn't a police officer or in politics, but I know just looking at my own kids that, you know, those days I wish I could be there, and they know, and I'm sure your family knows how much we love them. So I think the priority in civil service is knowing that you're doing for the greater good. You know, I think it's a calling. So for you, the calling came when? When did you, and I know you're in the Senate now, prior to that, how did it progress? How did it evolve to where you are now?
Well, like I said, I searched around, found this Republican club is very small, a group of individuals, and rarely met. And the president was elected to the county commission and asked me would I be interested in taking it over, and I said, well, there's not really anything to take over. There's hardly even having meetings. And then he called me one more time and said, if you don't take it, I'm going to just disband it. And I thought, well, maybe if I take this in a different direction, it might actually be worth doing. And so I talked to some friends. I accepted becoming the president. We then did everything out of the box, the first website, first trifold envelopes and business cards. And we were selling merchandise around the state. We became the largest monthly attended Republican organization in the state of Michigan, per the state Republican Party chair. And it was from that point that I achieved quite a bit of recognition from individuals in the community, and ran for the county commission.
Okay, and that's Oakland County.
Oakland County Commission. And I represented White Lake and Waterford for 6 years, and the county commission. And then from there, there was an open seat in the House, the State House, and I ran for that position and won that, and was 2 years in the State House. So
those who may not know, that would be considered a state representative?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So state representative for 4 years, and then the Senate seat opened up, and I could have continued 2 years further in the House and then be done and go back to insurance, but the seat opened up. I decided I'll run for that and ended up winning, and so I've been in this position since the first of the year. Okay.
So it's fairly new to you in terms of, I mean, obviously the political arena is not new. You've been doing it for with the county and then with the state representative for multiple years now. I think it's just, would you consider different protocols and things like that, a larger group? What's really the difference between the state representative and the Senate? Is there?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few differences. The House has 110 members. The Senate has 38. Just that smaller number means that you're going to get to know all of the members better on both sides of the aisle. You sit in smaller rooms where you're having discussions. You get to meet them at more functions because it's a much smaller group. So that makes a big difference, coupled with, in the House, they have a 2-year term. And Michigan has the shortest term limits in the nation.
Really? I didn't know that.
No other state has a permanent 6-year term. So every 2 years, a third are coming in and a third are going out continuously.
So getting to know people and working together is difficult, right?
It is. It's very difficult to establish the relationships. And people say, well, what does that matter? Well, it matters a great deal, because so much of what you do in the legislature is based on trust. It's based on reputation. It's based on reliability, because you can't know everything. So you have to accept some of the things people tell you. If they're not truthful, you can really get led down a bad path. If the individual is honest and reliable, you know, when this person tells me, I can pretty much take that to bank.
Okay.
But to learn that is not something you just divine because you walked into the building. It takes time. It takes learning those personalities. And there are frankly people that will tell you anything that you want to hear to get what their agenda is.
Yeah.
There's others that are so rock solid that, like I said, you could take it to the bank. And it's not partisan. I mean, I've met very trustworthy people on both sides of the aisle. I've met very distrustworthy people on both sides of the aisle. But the fact is it takes time to do that. And in the Senate, you get a 4-year term. So not only is it a smaller group that you're going to get to know better, you're going to get to know them for a longer period of time. And in fact, most of the time you end up serving with them for the full 8 years of your 2-year possible terms.
Okay, that's wonderful. And it seems like it's the amount of time coupled with the relationships is really what can make a difference. Obviously, state representative can make a huge difference in the community and in the our general area. But it sounds like that more time that you have, coupled with the building of the relationships, makes the Senate a place where you feel like you can do a lot of good work. So we'll take a short break and we'll return with more West Bloomfield 911.
I was out shopping the other day when a man approached me and said, "Aren't you the treasurer, Andy Meisner?" "Yeah," I said, "that's me." He told me he had a stack of mail from our office, but had been too scared to open it. He asked if there was anything I could do to help him manage his delinquent property taxes. The answer I told him was yes. Help is available. If you're like him or know someone who's fallen behind on property taxes, know that help is available. But before the deadline, contact our office immediately before it's too late. If you experience a financial hardship, there may be money available to pay your property taxes. Step Forward Michigan is a federally funded program that assists homeowners with delinquent mortgages and property taxes. If you qualify for the program, they'll pay up to $30,000 in the form of an interest-free, payment-free, forgivable loan. You must have income to pay taxes going forward. We have financial counselors on hand to help you complete an application and to assist with budgeting and connecting you with other resources. Foreclosure prevention is in everybody's best interest. Not only can we keep families in their homes, but we can protect property values and keep our neighborhoods strong. Let's fight foreclosure and keep Oakland County a great place to live, work, and play.
Welcome back to West Bloomfield 911. I'm your host, Tim Shepard. Again, I'm here with State Senator Jim Runstad. Senator, again, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come and share your life and what you're doing in the Senate with our community. So
Absolutely.
we appreciate that. We're going to get into, so we've been talking about how you became in politics and serving in a civil service type role for the community. Now I want to talk about some specifics. I know that suicide, in my work as a police officer, we see many things, and suicide is one of those. Can you tell me a little bit about the Suicide Prevention Commission?
Yes, suicide across the United States is an epidemic. It is exploding, but not in every state. Some states are much worse than others. Michigan is particularly bad. We've always had a pretty high suicide rate, but in a little over the last 10 years, we've had a 33% increase in suicides. And there's no coordinated effort. There's these silos that are operating around the state. You might have community mental health working on something. You might have a church working on something else. But it isn't a coordinated effort, and it really has to be dealt with. I've had groups come into my office, and I ask a lot of questions about data, and they simply don't seem to know any of the answers. Okay. So I came up with this idea last year to put together a commission that is going to coordinate a statewide effort to work on preventing suicides. Okay. And one of the things I found out is you cannot deal with all suicides as a uniform standard. you would have a situation where maybe a middle school child is being bullied at school and doesn't want to go to school because of the relentless bullying and is thinking of suicide. You may have a 75-year-old veteran who can't sleep at night because they're thinking about someone they shot in Vietnam, 50 years ago. And those two are completely different. And if you try to address them the same, they'd say, you don't even understand where I'm coming from. Right. Those individuals, first responders, what they deal with is different than another group of individuals. Say farmers, rural farmers are having a problem. That's a different group. Their situation, their challenges are different. So this commission is going to have many subcommittees that are going to address all of these categories where there are high rates of suicide and work on a strategy to prevent them. What kind of resources are we going to need? What kind of data is there? What kind of studies there that are across the country that will work on preventing suicides? And it's something that has been an overwhelming positive response. In fact, I've never seen anything like that. We have had groups from all over the state of Michigan that are really begging to be a part of this commission. So the commission is going to have a core of decision makers, and then we'll have subcommittees, as many as we need, to make sure we're addressing all of these areas. And I think it's going to make a real effort on driving down the rates of suicide. It is so horrifying, of all the things you can do in life, whether you self-medicate or you have some depression issues or maybe things haven't gone right for you in a period of time, but someone who takes that final act, ending it all, never do they actually want to die. What happens is they feel today is so bad that it's not worth living, and all the tomorrows are going to be as bad as today. Yeah. So getting to them to the point where they see that there is joy, there is a difference, there is help, is so important, and I think that this committee will make a big difference in addressing that.
It's interesting that you say that because, when we look at people who are in politics, sometimes I say we, I'm talking about like a layperson that's not a politician or not involved in the political arena, because I'm not, I vote and things like that, but I'm not, I try to keep up on what's going on in the world. But from my professional side, I see suicide a lot. And I see suicide, and it doesn't matter your race, your religion, it doesn't matter your socioeconomic status. It affects multitudes of people. So to see someone that is in your position, that is going out and trying to look at what's going on in the environment, in the community, and this is every community. This is not just West Bloomfield or Commerce or White Lake or anything. It's everywhere and can affect anyone. So that shows obviously your compassion for the community. And those are the things that are important to people like myself, because when I go to someone who has taken that final act, it breaks my heart. I look at that and I'm a human being. I look at that as wondering what happened? Why did they feel like that was the only case or only thing they could do to make the pain stop? I think that's what people want, is that pain to stop. And hopefully the commission and the insight into making a commission will help the community not feel alone in those situations. So I think that's an excellent thing. And I had mentioned prior to the shooting that, and I say shooting, our video recording right now, that in my professional life, I'm also I'm an evidence technician, but I'm also on our crisis negotiation team. So I deal with people who are in crisis a lot, and it's important for us to have those resources. So hopefully some good things can come from this commission, and we can work together on all different levels of the government to try to make a difference. So that's wonderful, and I'm very happy to hear that that's going on, because mental health is something that I think we need to address. And I would assume from this alone, the commission I'm talking about, that's something that you feel the same.
Oh yeah, it passed unanimous through the House, just passed through the Senate, just passed the House committee. I think it'll be unanimous in the House. I think it'll be signed by the governor. It's going to last for 4 years. It's unpaid. It is going to be charged with getting solutions, and I am going to be involved with making sure this is not sitting around having meaningless discussions. We're going to get data. We're going to be using universities to gather data.
Okay.
We are going to be making a difference in those 4 years.
Well, that's amazing, and like I said, I'm definitely glad to hear that, and I think that the rest of our watchers and viewers will think that that's an excellent cause, because like I had mentioned, just from my perspective, it touches a lot of lives, and it's not just somebody who is depressed. It could be the whole gamut. So that's wonderful to hear. And as far as funding and things like that, so we're going to move to a different topic, but I know that you're, owning your own company and working with a lot of numbers and things like that, finances play a big part in your business professionally, but also in your professional life as a senator. Talk a little bit about some of the budget plans coming up for like the troopers and things like that.
Yeah, we just put in $13.9 million for additional, I think 85 additional troopers out on the road. So I think that's going to make a big difference. The number of troopers has been going down in the state of Michigan
Okay.
for a substantial number of years. So this is going to really start ramping that number up. The budgets are still being worked upon. We have, the House and the Senate have to put their budgets together. Then they have a conference committee to try to agree. And then the governor has her budget, and then they have a conference committee to try to agree. That has to be done by October. But we hope to get it done much earlier, because the earlier that we can get it done, schools and municipalities can start making their budgets. They're putting their budgets together now, and they need to know how much they can spend.
Okay.
So the quicker we get that done, the better. And the big piece of that right now is the roads. We are going to be meeting, going back to Lansing, and working on what are some solutions to these roads issues.
Okay.
We do know there needs to be more money put to the roads, so that's going to be a huge priority for us. Okay. We were pleased to be able to get an agreement on auto no-fault insurance. When I was going out and hitting doors, talking to people, probably at least in the top two issues was the price of their auto insurance.
Okay.
So next year, the $190 catastrophic fund charge on every car is going to go down to $40. So there'll be an immediate,
wow, that's huge.
Immediate cost savings instantly
Okay.
at that point. On top of that, the PIP coverage, your personal injury protection coverage, is the next biggest category you have on your coverage. Oftentimes 60% of your total cost. Those are estimated to go down between 30 and 50%.
Wow.
So you should see radical drops in the price of auto insurance coverage over the next couple of years.
That's great.
The individuals will be given options from, on top of, if you're Medicare, it will coordinate with this, or if you're private health insurance, but you can get a $50,000, a $250,000, a $500,000, or unlimited coverage, depending on which package you choose. So for the first time, they'll have choices to be able to decide what kind of a package they want. So that was signed by the governor. That is now the law. We just have to go through the implementation period.
Well, that's great to hear, because I can tell you one thing. I mean, I have cars, and I know that insurance costs a lot. Obviously, it varies from state to state, but I think for our community, it is a big deal, and I think people on limited budgets and things like that, this can really help, and especially an immediate notice, right? A few pennies here and there, yeah, it adds up, but a huge chunk like you're talking about that potentially could happen, I think will make a real difference in people's budgets, and people with Medicare that have expenses that are pretty much locked in. That's going to give them some extra cash to do things that they want to do. So that's great. And speaking of Medicare and things like that, let's talk about seniors for a second. In West Bloomfield, which in a lot of our outlying communities, we have a diverse population age-wise, but we also have a large population that is senior citizens. Can you tell me a little bit about some things you do for senior citizens that you feel is important for our community? Absolutely.
Last session, I was able to get through a form that has all of the scenarios that a senior would be dealing with financial, emotional, physical abuse. Before this, excuse me, before this, an officer would go in, take testimony in a home, and hear that, well, a senior says these things happen, or a individual representing the senior says these things happen, and they would write down, say, a paragraph, go back to the prosecutor. The prosecutor would say, well, there's not enough to prosecute, or go back and get more information. This form was designed in the state of Michigan, and it is a form that was not being used uniformly, but it has all the questions, the pertinent questions, whether it's financial abuse, someone's stealing the money from that senior. If it's physical abuse, it has all of the same diagramming for domestic abuse, where you mark where the abuse has taken place, or emotional abuse. So in one form, it's a complete form that has all the information. When that officer goes back to the prosecutor is going to say, well, there's nothing here because we have all the information, or, yeah, we have enough to go on, but they're going to have everything done. That is going to be used by all departments in the state of Michigan.
That's great to hear.
So there will not be things falling through the cracks. I got that passed last session. This session, I am adding financial theft from seniors, if it's in any organized way, to the RICO standard.
Okay.
That
Wow.
means it will be organized crime
Sure.
if they're stealing from seniors, and there is a lot of organized theft from seniors.
Sure.
And then finally, something I'm very proud of, in fact, I was just talking to a group today, it's probably the most popular thing I've ever talked with seniors, and that is permitting the family members to put a videotape in the nursing home room.
Okay.
Currently, very few, I'm not sure if any, nursing homes in Michigan permit the family to put a videotape in the room.
Okay.
So if you have an assisted living facility, that room is considered yours, you can put a
Sure.
videotape in.
Okay.
But if you're in a nursing home room, even if you're there by yourself and you're paying for that room, the nursing homes typically do not allow you to do that. You can go online and see the most horrific cases of abuse imaginable by family members who either put those videos in and recorded them illegally, or they were from the 5 states that that require that you're allowed to put those in. So there's a lot of protections in place. If there's more than one person in the room, you have to get permission from them.
Okay.
They have to put a notice up there that this is being recorded. You can't use audio per state law. You can't have a place where individuals can come in and have an audio tape, but you can have the videotape portion.
Okay.
In terms of privacy, the nursing home could say, listen, if we're doing a procedure, we're going to shut the curtain.
Sure.
We're going to do the procedure where the privacy is required. That's all permitted in the bill.
Okay.
So the safety is there. Families now can watch on their phone their senior, if they're watching TV or if they're reading a book or whatever, they can watch them and they can see how they're being taken care of. There's been so many times where a person, a staff member, abused or raped the individual in the nursing home, and then they were denying anything, and then the tape surfaces and shows what actually happened.
Sure.
So this could give real-time ability for family members to watch their loved one to make sure there's no abuse going on. It's in the House Committee on Health,
Okay.
and I would encourage any of your listeners to contact the state legislature and ask for the Health Committee and say you want the nursing home videotaping bill up for a vote. That's
I
what it's
agree.
going to take.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we can help promote that, because from a law enforcement perspective, is we want people safe. The criteria in terms of the cameras up there has to be a sign, those kind of things. Those are all reasonable, right? Those are reasonable things that if you're in, you run you look at liability alone for a nursing home, for example, or I guess it wouldn't really geared towards assisted living, but more towards like a nursing home. The liability is going to be on, if something happens and they don't have cameras, well, then there's some liability issues there for the nursing home. So hopefully there's some financial motivation there for people to get involved as well. I'm talking about the businesses themselves, where they may not want these things. But the reality is that we all have people in our lives that are senior citizens, and we want them safe, and they want to be safe, and we're going to be senior citizens, right? So we want those protections as well. So I think that's an amazing idea, and I think that our community will support that, and I know our law enforcement brothers and sisters will definitely enforce that and appreciate the help when we try to catch these horrible people that do things to people that we love and are innocent, but also vulnerable. They're very vulnerable, and there's nothing worse than going into a nursing home and seeing someone that's been abused or taken advantage of, regardless of, even if it's minimal, and I say minimal in terms of maybe they've stolen something, and that's not minimal to them, but I'm talking about in severity of crime, compared to someone who's been, physically attacked, assaulted. We want to stop all that. We want to be able to catch these people, and we want to stop them, deter them. If they see a camera up, hey, that may, and a sign that says we're watching you. And when you go into work that day, and if you're an employee and you have this idea where you want to take advantage of people, attached with the RICO, I think that's going to be, the consequences are going to jump up exponentially, and I think that's what's going to take to stop that. And I think that's a wonderful idea, and I know our community will love that as well. Moving on to mail theft. Here in West Bloomfield, we have that issue, not off the charts, but I mean it happens, and it'll happen in like lumps. It'll come. There'll be a time when it happens a lot. So maybe it's groups coming through. What's going on with mail theft, and what your ideas are?
Well, mail theft is an exploding problem. Okay. Not only mail theft out of the mailbox, where a lot of times the thieves will identify individuals, a lot of times veterans who are receiving pain medication, and they target those to steal the pain medication out of the mailbox. But sometimes they will steal checks. The problem with the current law is that unless it has a value, then you can't prosecute. So you could go into a house and they have stacks of checks all over the place, but until the check is cashed, the check itself has no value. So they can't even be prosecuted under that mail theft. This bill is going to permit either a first charge of a misdemeanor and a second charge of a felony that will be significant in terms of really going after them and permitting the local law enforcement to go after them. Right now they have to go to the federal level. Sure. Well, we talked to the postmaster, and she said there's no way we can enforce this. We just don't have an enforcement team for this. So unless it's a very high dollar amount with just the right circumstances, they're not going to go after them. The FBI is not going to call and say I had some package stole off my porch. They're not sending Special Agent Jones out there to check this out. So this bill allows all the local enforcement to be able to go after these individuals. It'll be a state law, and it currently is not a state law, but it will go after them in a real severe way, and the problem is exploding. Last year alone, there was 17,000 just Amazon packages alone stole off of the porch steps. 17,000 just in Michigan, and the chart is like this. Yep. So it's a real major problem, and a lot of times you wouldn't even find out about it because it gets stolen. They call Amazon and they said, oh, probably got stolen, send another one out. Okay. So they are picking up a cost, and that gets added onto the customer cost of all of the mail. So it's a real problem, and this bill passed unanimous out of the Senate. It just passed this week, unanimous out of the House committee, and it'll be to the floor of the House, and then I believe will be signed by the governor.
That's great to hear. You've said a lot of things today that directly affect our community, which means you're doing your job, and we appreciate that. We really do. All the points we've talked about have been wonderful and very important, and you're doing a great job, and we appreciate that. And I want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything you want to say to your constituents here in the area, when we can end on that. Is there anything that you're interested in pointing out that you're still working on, or what do you feel that you could say to us?
I would say for me, I always felt that working for the vulnerable, for families, was the thing I would be best suited to do. And always loved children since the time I was very little. And I remember my wife saying to me when our other 4 kids were older, would you consider being a foster care parent? That she thought was something that it was a time of our life where we could actually do that. And I said, yeah, I think I would like to do it. I had never thought of it, but I think I would like to do it. Sure. So we did. We became foster care parents. We adopted out of foster care. And what those foster care children go through is really something that the average person can't even imagine. Sure. I used to help coordinate Kid Speak, where these were the children aging out of foster care. They're leaving the system. Oftentimes they were in residential housing, and now they're going on their own. They're going with no typically no mom and dad in that situation, sometimes no siblings. They're going out into the world with nothing.
Okay.
And to hear their stories was so heartbreaking. And so we have now 14,000 kids out there right now in the system who need foster care parents. And the first bill that I got passed was we were advertising for foster care children, and then you'd have to fill out literally a stack of papers this big, because my wife and I filled it all
Sure,
out,
yeah.
to demonstrate you're a decent person, and then you'd have to pay like $300 to submit the form.
So very difficult.
And I was saying, why are we advertising, having them fill us, and charging, for some people, $300 is a lot of money.
Sure.
So I got that fee eliminated. So now we advertise, we get people who are good parents, fill out the forms, and then there's no charge to submit those forms.
That's great.
So that was the first thing I did, and I was very proud of that as my
You
first
should be
bill.
proud of that. You know, it's interesting because when things affect us in our personal life, that's what we're kind of drawn to try to repair and work on in our professional life, at least for you and I. And I think you're doing a great job, and I just want to thank you for coming out today. But also, you came to our police memorial in May, and you know, I just wanted to let you know that it meant a lot to us as a police department that you came and took your time out of your schedule to come and do that for us. So thank you.
Honored to do it.
You keep doing a great job for us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim, so much.
I'd like to thank you for joining us for this episode of West Bloomfield 911. You can keep up with the police department by liking us on Facebook and following us on Twitter and Instagram. You can also sign up for Nixle.com and CrimeMapping.com for the most up-to-date information from the police department. Thank you for watching, take care, and goodbye.